Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Smith and I run a little blog called simusysadmin.com, and I wrote an article last month saying how monitoring sucks, which we all know is true, but what I mentioned was that I thought this startup called dataloop.io was the next thing that would make it simple. And some of the fallback that came out of Reddit was that people didn't believe you could have a complicated system and have it simple to monitor. And to some degree, they're correct. I mean, complicated systems will always be complicated, but your monitoring can still be simple, and there's no reason to make it harder than it actually is. Now, to prove that, I've created this little demo to show everyone what I mean. So let's start with what I've got running on my server here called Monster Munch. I have a few files. In short, all of these files, they just use the VirtualBox VBox manage command to get VMs, clone VMs, turn them on, turn them off, and that's pretty much all it does. The graphite file there simply uses the dataloop command line client to get a number of agents that are registered with the system and then pumps it back into dataloop as a metric to be monitored. So while I'm talking, let's kick that off so that it does something useful. Let's find it. Great, that's that running. Now I'll just talk about this before I actually do it. When I kick this off, it basically will take an image that I've already created. Now that image is pretty standard. The only thing that's different is there's an upstart script I've put on there which will run the command line install of dataloop, and it will randomly assign a tag to it based on one that's already defined in the GUI. And that is more or less it, and then obviously the other scripts kick in to turn it on and off. So I've got 10 tabs open, so we can run 10 of these threads at once. It will only create 25 VMs, but it will stop and start them a lot quicker as a result. Right, so let's go look at dataloop now. Okay, this is dataloop setup console. Now as you can see, I've got one Monster Munch here at the moment with nothing running on it. And I've got some groups defined, all web, app and DB. So let's create an environment, drag that on, and let's go into that and create the services we need. So web, app, DB, and because I have Monster Munch, I'm just going to create a group called Monster. Right, so the next thing to do is to drag the tags that we want into the right group. So we'll put the web in the web one, app in app, and of course DB in DB. Now, just to be slightly different, I'm going to drag base into each of these. So you can choose any of these plugins that are already pre-written to drop in. But I'm choosing base because it's just a simple one. It's memory, disk, CPU, the usual things everyone wants to manage. Now, because Monster Munch isn't part of any of those groups, I just need to drag him in directly into the monster group. He says, trying harder. There we go. Great. So that concludes setting up the environment, and all of that is done. So next, let's look at the analytics page. Okay, this is the dashboard page. So let's just create a new dashboard, and we'll call it demo. And what I'll do is, before I start the demo, I'll just open up Monster Munch and we'll just drag on these metrics, which they may have some information from previous runs. In fact, there's a wonderful graph, but let's prove it does some cool stuff anyway. Right, so that's the graphs done. Now, if I just go back to the setup page, because that'll become relevant in a second, I'm just going to kick off the virtual machines now spinning up. So the first one will register them all. Let's get that done, and then we'll just bounce through the rest of the tabs and fire them up as well. Right, cool. So that should now be bringing things up. Now we go into the UI. What we'll see is, as and when new sources, or in this case agents, come online, they'll start appearing in the sources list on the left. In fact, there's one. And we start seeing the registration come up. So you see it's new agent, the group it was in, the name it was in, and also you see this RPC says it's not connected, but if you keep an eye out on the right hand side, what you'll see is when RPC becomes available, because it's a slightly slower starting process, it will then pop up as well on the right hand side, and then as that's popped up, things will continue to work. So right, let's just give it a second and see what happens. I know a lot more are coming. There we go. There you go. So you see all the RPCs now coming online as well for the first lot of agents. So it's just a little bit slow to start with. Now if we go into the groups here, what we'll be able to see is you'll be able to see which servers are in which groups already. So web has none, app has quite a few, and DB has one as well. So as you can see, there is a random distribution, and if we go back into here, what you can see on this bit now is we still have the plugin and the agents that are there. Now you don't see the agents on here because the list would just go on forever, but if I click on Monster, we do see an agent because in this particular case we dragged the agent straight onto there. We haven't put any of these agents into any of these groups. They're only associated via the fact that they have these tags on them already. So if we go back to the analytics page, so as we see, more and more will be coming online. It looks like I forgot to start my cron. No, that is running. The graphite thing I have only runs once every 60 seconds, so it might take a little time for that to kick in. Okay, so as you can see, it is now starting to go up and the graphite agent's coming on. So to save a bit of time, so you don't have to watch the whole demo, which can take a while, we used the previous time when I ran it. You can see the agents come up and they drop down, they go back up depending on how many agents are there. And see, we're in very early stages of this run for it coming up, and it does last a while. But if we create a new dashboard, I'm just going to call this one Bob because I like Bob. Let's have a look in here. We should have some agents on some of these. Yeah, let's have a look. Excellent. So I'm just going to look at one of these web servers and drag its CPU on. Ooh, CPU is quite high. Interesting. And then I'll take an app server and I'm just going to monitor the memory on the app server. Now this is a prototype version of the dashboard, which isn't largely available because I don't know if people realise, but Data Loop's still in closed beta, and at Hive Home for British Gas we're very lucky to have access to it. And obviously these details will change so that you know which boxes there are, and the next feature we've asked for is to be able to stack the graphs one on top of each other as well. Just go back to the cell, because what I want to show is as agents go offline they deregister, and you might have noticed the notifications on the right hand side. A red one says there you go, RPC offline, agent disconnected, agent deregistered. And as you notice on the left hand side, what we see is the agents will go orange and then they'll drop offline. Right, now I'm just going to kill a few of the scripts in the background so it gets a bit quicker. Alright, so I'm just going to Control C these because we don't actually need these running. I think we've shown enough going on. Okay, right, so what will happen eventually is this will get into a tidy up state where it just terminates the nodes there. Now that I've killed all the others, not too many more will be turning on and off in the UI. So we see deregister and register just keep going. And again, this is one of the reasons why at Hive we like it, because when we have our auto scaling groups on our web front end, these nodes come up and down continually, and we don't necessarily want to be installing and uninstalling agents on them. So a system which we can just drop a tag on, say, by the way, you are a web server, and it comes on and it gets all the checks, is better. I mean, if you consider the equivalent with Puppet and Chef, where yes, you can get the registration, you can put cookbooks and Puppet modules in place where a server comes online and it automatically gets all the checks it wants, but it's the deregistration that's important. And in the past I've seen it where you register all these agents and you never get around to tidying them up. Now it looks like because the sources list is getting smaller as they start deregistering that I'm losing the data, but that's also not true. I mean, in this case it is, because I'm not going to get the fingerprints off these instances, but Monster Munch, for example, has been turned on and off continually over the last sort of 3 or 4 months. But because I'm reusing the same fingerprint ID all the time, when it gets turned back on, its metrics and all its past metrics are linked together, so I don't lose that historic data. Now, what this means we can do is we can generate fingerprints that are used for, say, graphite to push numbers in. So we could create a prod fingerprint and use that to track the number of connections across the board. And we can log metrics from all agents then on the same fingerprints to get the details into and out of the actual interface. So what I want to do now, just while we're waiting, is go into the analytics again. Oh, demo, so it's still going. Right, I'm just going to pause the video because I think it's probably going to take a while to get to the turning it on and off stage, which it is. So I'll just leave it on this screen for now, and I'll just pause the recording and come back to it when it gets to the bit where it starts deregistering them en masse. Right, so just bring us back online now, because what we can see is all the VMs are starting to deregister themselves, and as I say, there's a bit of a naughty script I had to write to cope with the fact that VirtualBox has a few quirks, and if it's running, it just tells it to power off, and then it waits 60 seconds and it will turn off, and if it's already powered off, it just unregisters the VM, so they gradually disappear. So if I go into VirtualBox, there's only a few running. So let's just go back to data loop, and as you can see in here, there's just a few VMs there, and I imagine we'll see a few gradually drop off. There we go, so a few more dropping off just as the script finishes tidying itself up. So it'll take a few runs because the script has to sleep for 60 seconds in between powering, so it'll take at least 2 runs, possibly 3, to tidy up fully. And there's just 2 VMs left, and then we'll be back to no VMs apart from Monster Munch, which has been there forever and a day. So I guess why that's going to take another few seconds. I just want to talk about this repos one here that's not yet active. That exists for one reason only, which is eventually I'll be able to write a Nagios check, push it into my Git repo. This app will pick it up and then push it down onto my servers. And the concept of having this GUI that people can use to control and design and architect their system, and also coming back to it and saying, well, actually, as a sysadmin, do I want to use a GUI? Probably not. All of this architecture, as in drawing the framework for putting the environments in and the service groups, is completely unnecessary because it will be possible to do it through GitHub. Just go back to the terminal and make sure that is finished. It's definitely running. Good. So let's go back to data. Oh no, it's stopping 7 VMs, powering off. Excellent. So probably go back to data. That's probably all gone. Yep, all the VMs are now gone. So I think that probably concludes the end of it. But so we still have some graphs on there, but there's nothing there. So let's go back to demo. So if we look at this second graph, which is probably the most important, as you can see, it registered up to 7 at its peak, it dropped down to 2, went back up to 3, and then it just terminated them all for app. Total DB, see a bit more spiky, up and down. And then for web agents, up and straight back down. And the total agents, what did we get up to? We only got up to 16 on at one. Oh no, 17. Good. So I think these graphs help demonstrate that it's able to fire up things into different agents quite easily and quite quickly, and into and out of these groups, and they do get their checks, as we proved on the Bob dashboard earlier. I think that's all I can really demo, but thanks for taking the time to watch the video, and I hope it was useful. Thanks.